Well, the White House is now scrambling to clarify why President Obama called the deadly terror attack on a Paris kosher market on a Friday afternoon a random attack. Watch this exchange with ABC's John Carl and our own Ed Henry pushing White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest to explain those comments.
This was an attack on a kosher deli. Does the president have any doubt that those terrorists attacked that deli because there would be Jews in that deli?
The adverb that the president chose was used to indicate that the individuals who were killed in that terrible, tragic incident were killed not because of who they were, but because of where they randomly happened to be.
They weren't killed because they were in a Jewish deli, though? They were in a kosher
John,
deli?
These individuals were not targeted by name. This is the point.
Not by name, but by religion, were they not?
Well, John, there were people other than just Jews who were in that deli.
Do you see any doubt that deli was attacked because it was a kosher deli? This was
No,
not
John.
any random deli.
No, John.
This was a kosher deli.
I answered the question once. No. Ed.
So then why didn't the president acknowledge that? If he knows that and it's obvious, why didn't he say that?
The
The
president has acknowledged that on many occasions when he's had the opportunity to speak about this incident.
Boy, that was an awkward exchange, to be sure. Alan Colmes is Fox News radio host and a Fox News contributor. Brad Blakeman is a former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. And I want to start, gentlemen, by welcoming you first and then also showing you the tweet that was sent out subsequently by Josh Earnest. And here's what he says. Our view has not changed. Terror attack at Paris kosher market was motivated by anti-Semitism. POTUS didn't intend to suggest otherwise. Brad, you want to take this on?
Sure. I think the president intended to downplay the threat of terrorism. We saw in his interview the other day where he said that terrorism has been overblown. The threat to America and the world is not the way that the media is reporting or that their experts are saying. And then the president then does a 180 and comes up to Congress and says, I need war powers to fight an enemy he doesn't believe exists. It's absolutely inconsistent, and it's not leading on this issue at all.
Yeah, Alan, let me ask you this, because time and time again, the White House has a hard time. It's these tortured responses of so carefully choosing each word about things that I think most people look at and can be pretty clear about what happened. It was a Jewish kosher market. It was an anti-Semitic attack. Why would that be hard to say?
I think the difficulty is those who, for whatever reason, will never accept anything the president says. Brad will never like anything the president does or says.
I like when the president tells the truth.
And I think it's petty to take a word out of context and say, when he said randomly, what he was referring to was those people who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He never suggested, nor did the State Department, which right after the tragedy said the deli was targeted because it was a Jewish deli. There's no question about that. But who happened to be in the deli happened to be, sadly for them, random. And that's a distinction that I would think most people would understand.
I just think time and time again, it's this difficult process of talking about basically, the war on terror, the difficulty to call it what it is. And there has been clearly an effort, and Brad, you point this out, to minimize it, to say, look, it's basically going to affect very few lives on the large scale. They went on to say that global warming is going to affect the lives of more people ultimately than terrorism ever will. Brad, is that accurate?
It is not accurate, but the president began his presidency with this narrative. He told us we're not allowed to use the word terrorism. He scolded people within his administration who even mentioned the word radical Islam. So the whole verbiage has changed, but the problem hasn't changed. It hasn't gone away. My suggestion to the president is don't create a crisis, Mr. President, that we cannot solve because it doesn't exist. Let's solve those problems that humans are creating, and we have some control on eradicating. That's what we should be doing.
So
terrorism is the problem.
The president is in a difficult place at the moment, Alan, because on the one hand, he's trying to get backing and authorization from Congress to go against ISIS. On the other, he's telling the American people that they shouldn't be too worried about it, that it's a media-generated panic.
We're talking about two different things here. We're talking about proportionality. What we were saying was that the issue of global warming is a much more far-reaching issue that will affect over the long term a lot more people on the planet than does terrorism. Those people who are directly affected by acts of terror are a small number
Is that helpful,
comparatively.
though, at this moment, Alan? When you look at what's going on in the world, when you've got this girl killed who was held, when you've got people being burned in cages, is it helpful at this moment for the president to be making everybody feel like, you know, you're kind of overreacting because really what you should be worried about is climate change?
And that's not, he didn't say you shouldn't be worried about terrorism, and I believe what he was doing was answering a question. When he spoke to Ezra Klein at Vox, he was answering a particular question where he was putting things in proportionality, in proportion to each other. And again, I think the right will go after him for whatever he says, taking words out of context, taking the word randomly out of context, and not seeing the bigger picture, which is what the president was talking about in terms of where we're headed as a planet, and the fact that global warming is an issue that over time will affect more people. That's a fact.
It seems he's giving his own press secretary a very hard time
in
terms
of
having to interpret what it is he's saying and what he means, Brad.
Look, the president has 2 more years. He's not president for 100 years. And the current problem in his next 2 years is the threat of terrorism. The entire Middle East is in meltdown. It's not only a danger to us, it's a danger to Israel, our most valued ally. It's a danger also to our allies in Europe. So the president better fix that which is broken and not create a new Y2K on something he has no control over and is not the problem of the moment.
One last question. You know, Alan, do you think that the president is underestimating the thread that connects these acts that we're seeing of violence, of you know, terrorist violence, as he calls them?
And to say that he hasn't been proactive on terrorism, not only that, he credited the Bush administration as having dealt with the issue to the point where now we are focusing on, as has the last administration, on acts of terror around the world. And he's not ignoring it, as his detractors would say. He is forcefully and now asking for an authorization of military force, something you would think Republicans who want this war would approve. And now they're giving him a hard time about that. That's hypocritical.
I don't think anybody wants a war. I think people are attempting to deal with the situation as it exists and the threat as it exists. So we'll leave it there. Alan and Brad, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see you both.